Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in to the February edition of the CUNY BMI Dialogues. I really have to say nothing more than, it's Black History Month. This panel, this dialogue is going to be crazy. It's going to be amazing. Some of our panelists you already know from the past. We have a new guest moderator who is part of the BMI family and who is no stranger to the art world, to the performance world. So I just want to thank you, every single one of you, Mr. King, Mr. Ron Scott, Mr. Will Calhoun, and Temeskin for taking the time off your busy schedule to share with our students, to share with our administrators, so that we learn from your experience, from your expertise. And with that, I hand it over to Mr. Temeskin Takure.
All right, peace, everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As Jorge said, we're in for a great conversation with three amazing gentlemen who've accomplished so much. I'm gonna do a brief introduction to the conversation that we're gonna have today. We're gonna talk about roots, rhythm, and culture, and communicating in a troubled land. This particular group that we have are artists and writers and just an amazing group of men. So I'm gonna introduce them first. So we have Will Calhoun, drummer and producer of the band Living Color, academic lecturer, and an interdisciplinary artist, all right? So we have Will Calhoun. We also have Ron Scott, the jazz writer for the Amsterdam News and a freelance writer that covers the Black diaspora. He's written for the Daily News, Time Out magazines, and New York Times, to name a few. And our final member is Hollis King. He puts skin and bones into ideas. So if there's an idea, he comes in and fills that idea up, all right? So we're gonna start off with Brother Will Calhoun. We're gonna start with you. And just tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm all into talking about journeys. If you could talk about your journey and who you are and what you do, that would be really great, all right?
Thank you, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Will Calhoun. I'm from the Bronx, New York, otherwise known as God's country in my land. And grew up here in the Northeast Bronx. And how can I put it? A fantastic neighborhood. I grew up in a village, master musicians in my area. Some you may know, Steve Jordan or the Pumpkin, who started, nicknamed Pumpkin, drummer that began, in my opinion, and created the industry of hip hop. Errol Bedwood, Ray Chu, and there's so many other gentlemen from around this area. But I grew up here in the North Bronx, played in churches, after school programs, played in the park, which led me to studying at Jazz Mobile and these kind of places. Went to Berklee College of Music, graduated from there with a degree in recording and engineering. Left Berklee, and my first professional job was with Letta Mbulu, South African singer Letta Mbulu. If you don't know who she is, look her up. She's, I would say, very similar to Miriam Makeba. And Letta Mbulu was opening for Harry Belafonte, which then led me to getting the gig with the great Harry Belafonte. From Harry Belafonte, coming back home from being up in Boston, I was still trying to hustle and hang around town and see what was going on. My friends were getting deals and record deals and going on the roads. I was still smooshing with the Harlem, Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn folks. And that led me to meeting a gentleman named Vernon Reed, and that's how I sort of joined the band Living Color. But all the while, I was working with a lot of different artists, hip hop. I went to school with Scott LaRock. We went to high school together, played basketball together. So KRS-One and that whole crew was kind of from my generation. And my love for being here in town, I studied with a great jazz drummer named Harsey Arnold. And Harsey introduced me to Max Roach, Elvin Jones, Art Blakey, Charlie Persip, and so many other great jazz legends. So that was my first love. And that was the beginning of me hanging out in New York in the Village Vanguard and the Village Gate and all these kind of places, and seeing the masters play, seeing Dexter Gordon and Sonny Rollins and so many tremendous musicians play. So being a product of the 80s. I was into going downtown and checking out punk music, playing at CBGB's, alternative music, alternative rock. My friends that were doing graffiti, that wasn't my thing, but I did like graffiti. So those worlds started to merge on the Lower East Side. You had hardcore bands, you had hip hop artists, graffiti artists, everybody was down there, stick up kids, nerds, the whole nine. So it was a really great, fertile scene, which I think led to the coming of us, Living Color, the coming of Def Jam, the coming of Spike Lee, the coming of the Marsalis brothers getting signed to Columbia Records. All of these kind of great things were happening on Son Basquiat. There were so many great things happening around the same period of time, and I was happy to be kind of up in that mix. That's kind of my background. From then, I went on to still do, I'm still playing with Living Color, producing Mos Def when he was Mos Def. I know he's Yasin Bey now, and working with Run DMC, Public Enemy, producing Herb Alpert out in Los Angeles, working with George Clinton, Madonna, and I love the continent. So I was really fortunate to have opportunities to go over to Africa and work with Salif Keita, Youssou N'Dour, Umu Sangari, Baseku Kuyati, the Ganawa, master Ganawa musicians, Mahmoud Guinea, and Mustafa Bakbou, and all the master musicians in the Moroccan scene. So for me, the world is a place where it's our kind of room to explore things. And fortunately, in my childhood, growing up in the house I grew up in, we had like a little library. We had our little books on the wall. My dad had really amazing records. He was a naval sea captain, so my head was open early. I read National Geographic, always cover to cover. And my dad brought back music from Iran, Tehran, Egypt, Germany, France, as well as we had the usual records from that generation, Pig Meat Markham, comedy records, and Mahalia Jackson and Belafonte and Miles and Train. So the living room was the early part of my growth. And then when I was able to get out in the world and actually get a passport, I wanted to abuse it. And what's sitting behind me is a fantastic Aboriginal painting from a friend of mine named Martina. And I was able to spend some time in the outback of Australia with 8 or 9 different tribes, learning more about that 40,000-year-old culture. So I mix it all up, not to get too long-winded, but I really love the arts on the whole, writers, painters, filmmakers, musicians, and I think all of it comes together in my expression of art.
Thank you so much for that, Brother Calhoun. Thank you so, so much. He took us on a journey. For the students watching, you might want to go back, watch that again, write down the names, and start listening to these artists, start looking up these artists. Keep in mind, every time you listen to one of those artists, those streams add up. So we want to make sure that we definitely feed him back in that. Thank you so much for that, Brother Calhoun. All right, so the next person that I would love to hear from is Ron Scott. Brother Scott, how'd you come here today?
Wow, coming behind Calhoun is like some young cat coming behind Miles Davis, man. It's like, what do I say? Well, first of all, since this is Black History Month, I'd like to just offer condolences. I just found out this morning that Cliff Frazier died, and he was a pioneer and a warrior when it comes to Black theater and film. He was one of the administrators for Third World Cinema that had films like Claudine and some of Pryor's major films. So I just want to offer condolences because as an elder now, he's become one of our ancestors. So he's another person that if you're not familiar with, you should definitely Google him. I can say my parents came to New York from Florida when I was 3 years old. We lived on 135th Street and 8th Avenue. I now live on 135th and Lenox. So I've come full circle as far as transportation is concerned. We moved from Harlem to the East Bronx, up there similar to where Will lived. I started out in social work, so and sometimes when around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm watching some of these YouTubes with Craig Tate and all of these other great writers. I'm like, damn, I should have started earlier, but I think I was played an essential role in what I was doing in social work with young brothers and sisters, starting out at Rikers Island, adolescence for men. Then they transferred me over to the women's house. I was in foster care, and just being in that institution of social work and caring about other people, you know, is somewhat shocking. So what you try to do in institutions like this, you try to do the best you can and give young brothers and sisters all that you can, which is unfortunately always out of what the institution wants you to tell young people, you know, because it's the social structure that holds us back. It's not necessarily the white man, it's the social structure, the way they have it set up against us. So yeah, they're in power and we're constantly reacting. And when we try to move forward, they try to push us back. So it's always key that we stay connected with young folks. You know, so from social work, I was always into writing. So fortunately, after I got into FAMU, that was my first learning experience of Black culture. Unfortunately, I went through 12 years in the New York City Board of Education, didn't learn a damn thing about the history of Black folks, you know. So once I got there, I just went buck wild. I was like reading everything, you know, since I was the only child. When I was young, I read a lot. My father worked for the New York Times in maintenance, so he brought the New York Times home every day. They subscribed to Jet magazine, which was the Black Bible of America, and they subscribed to Ebony. So I read both of those religiously. You know, at 7 years old, because Emmett Till was 7 years older than me when they brutally killed him, I read that in Jet magazine when I was 7 years old, and it freaked me out, you know, because I was one of those kids. Since my parents were from Florida, after school was over, June 30th, they immediately shipped me off to Florida. And they did that from the time I was 7 until I was old enough to say, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. I think I want to stay here in the city and hang out with my boys. But all the time they were sending me there, they were sending me there by myself. So they would put me on, at 7 years old, I was on the train from New York to Florida, which is what, like 18 hours or something. I was doing that by myself, you know. So I think them sending me to Florida all of those years is what gave me the travel bug, which was accentuated by the fact that I wrote for the Amsterdam News. Another thing, since this is Black History Month, I have to mention that the Amsterdam News is one of the oldest Black newspapers in America. And I have to give all credit to Eleanor Tatum, the publisher, Black female, that's keeping it running with print as well as online. And also shout out to Kristen and Nayaba, the two sisters managing editors. You know, so the Amsterdam News is basically run by Black women, you know, so within the framework of Black History Month and within the framework of Black women moving forward and being in positions of power, you know, I have to give them credit. I'm honored that I write for a Black publication, you know, because so many times, you know, once we got past integration and once the brothers were able to move forward and go to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Black newspapers kind of took a backseat. but the Black newspaper is the Black drum of America. So without the Black newspaper, most of the things that you want to know, you won't know because you're not going to find it in the Times. You're not going to find it in daily news, or the Los Angeles Times or in Washington, because like I said, these papers, are the drums of America. And when you look at where we came from, the first thing when we came to America, what did they do? They banned the drum. Even if you look in New York City, with the first thing, and the white folks moved over there to Marcus Garvey Park, and the brothers had a ritual for over 30 years of playing the drums out there. What the first thing they do? They called downtown at Bloomberg and said, hey, those people out there are making noise, they got to stop it. And it was noise to them, but that was our spiritual way of life. It wasn't noise, it was Black spirituality and the roots coming from the motherland of Africa. So I've been able to go Europe, South Africa, Panama, all of these places as a jazz writer because of the Amsterdam News, which gives you a whole nother perspective on America. When you go somewhere else and the brothers and sisters in Africa was so good to me. It was like, my brother, you're home. It was none of that, divide and conquer or division. I was able to do so much writing in South Africa and in Cuba, because a brother would say, oh, Ron, you need to meet so-and-so. Okay, and it's not a matter of going to the office to meet them. You go to their house. You actually go to their house. I went to Ahmed Kafrada's house, who was with Mandela in prison, for 27 years, and he welcomed me into his home. We talked for a couple of hours, but that's how, when you go to other countries, that's how our brothers and sisters treat us, They treat us like brothers and sisters. How can you meet someone, I'm in Cuba. I'm talking to a brother, he says, hey, I want you to come to my house and meet my family. That's respect, so, and I owe all of this to being able to write. I owe all of this to musicians like Will Calhoun and Craig Harris, Miles, Charlie Parker, all the brothers that came before, because without musicians, without artists, without people like Hollis King that has a theater, there's nothing for me to write. So as Roy had said before, we're all basically one. We have different names, but we're all after the same goal. So
thank you for that so much, Brother Scott.
I hope it wasn't too long.
No. A lot of knowledge in there. Thank you so much for sharing that. The man who puts, the skin and the meat and bones into ideas, Brother Hollis King, go ahead.
To hear her tell it, she had given me a bath and put me to bed. Later that night, while checking on me, she discovered I had a roasting fever. So she rushed me to the hospital, and the doctor said, yeah, he has a roasting fever. She said, doctor, my grandson cannot stand up. I was 3 years old. I was afflicted with polio. I held on to my grandmother's hands and she held on to me. She taught me to wash, to cook, to clean. I still remember what it was like to walk across an empty room. It would take me what would seem hours just to cross an empty room. On Sundays, my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins, we would all get together. We'll get in a car. We'll drive around the roundabouts, the bougainvillea hedges, and we'd head to the beach. As we got closer to the beach, it got breezier and breezier. The soil got sandy. And then we got to the beach, we'd put out a spread. Red beans and rice, curry chicken, stewed chicken, sorrel, ginger beer, and rum. The adults always wanted rum. I would walk away from where they were and I would stand on the water's edge and look out at that horizon line. And every now and then a ship would pass by. And I would ask myself, was it a beautiful sunny day when that wretched ship came over that horizon line? That's the beginning of our plight. That's where we stand. That's where we fight for our humanity, from the edge of the water to that horizon line. There's a highway of bones from West Africa to all of the Americas. And we sit in the middle of this stench and this mess, trying to hold on every day to our humanity. So I do it through art. I do it through the discipline that I turned out to be good at by accident, right? My mother wanted me to be a lawyer, and I would go home and draw every night. And my African-American girlfriend said to me, why don't you do that for a living? I said, do what for a living? She said, make art. You could make art. So I go to school, and my teacher said to me one day, what agency you work for? I said, agency? I lift boxes on 28th Street. So he gets a Post-it and he writes the name of this place. He says, call him tomorrow, tell him I sent you. And 4 days later, I'm working on Park Avenue and Lexington, 40th Street between Park and Lexington, in a penthouse. A kid from Brooklyn with no idea what a penthouse was, with the stairs going from one floor to the other. And I'm like, I'm basically like blinded by this miracle, right? I don't know what's going on, and I work and I try to figure it out. I'm a kid, I'm a teenager, going to school and working. And in the middle of this, between hard work and perseverance, there comes luck, right? There's what you call, you leave that space for grace, where someone calls you, taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, I see you. And we're gonna measure you whole and give you an opportunity. So you go to school and you make all this effort, but there are so many things along the way that turns and twists that you cannot imagine. But one thing for sure is, if you do the work, you have a chance. If you don't do the work, there is no chance. And so at some point, the job died, and a friend calls me at a record company and says, Hollis, why don't you come by? Give you some CDs and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. But one of the things I do whenever I'm in a job or not, I'm always making my own stuff, right? Because I'm putting skin and bones ideas, and the ideas can't stay in my head. I always have to put them down. So I started making t-shirts and stuff like that. And I take a bag of t-shirts to this record company. And the owner of the record company at the time was Larry Rosen, who founded GRP and all that. So I go over there with a bag of t-shirts, and down the hall comes Larry Rosen, right? And he says, what you guys got there? I go, I got a bag of stuff here. And he pulls out stuff, right? And he's like, I like this shirt. Can I buy it? And he goes in his pocket to pay me for the shirt. And I'm thinking, I'm in the record company with the president of the company. You know, I'm trying here. So I'm like, no, that's free, that's for you. So that's how I started working in music. I remember the first person I did an album cover for was Dr. Billy Taylor. And at the time of the record company, I was the only Black guy in the art department. and I was a freelancer making a ton of money, right? And somebody runs on the hall like after the first 6 months of me working there, and they go, "Congratulations." Congratulations for what? Oh, you didn't hear? I'm like, "Hear what?" "You got nominated for a Grammy." I'm like, "What?" I felt like such a fake, because I thought I was okay at making art, but I was not putting the full effort, right? I was kind of playing, I was kind of making art, but not taking it seriously. It terrified me. And I said, they're gonna call and realize they gave the wrong guys the tickets to come to the Grammys, right? That I'm a fake and all that. But what it did was it forced me to think about, what is creativity? Where does it come from? And how could I make art more often that's creative and that's interesting? And so that's the beginning of me trying to understand the practice of making creative things, and also at the center of anything I do, sit who I am and who my grandmother taught me to walk, who she is. And so that's my journey, and my journey throughout my life at Universal Music and wherever I go is to have a sit at the center of my practice and to ask questions about what stories are we telling and how do I represent in a place of making decisions. How do I make decisions to impact us in the most positive way? How do I become an advocate for our position in this world? How do I try to fight for our humanity in the place by which or where I stand, right? You stand on shaky ground trying to get some hold or some grip, and then something comes and pulls you away like a wind, like a breeze, like water. And so as we continue to move, I'm always asking myself, what can I do and how could I elevate and tell the story from a place of honesty and artistic excellence? So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you all so much. That was that's a lot. Learning a lot. No, I'm learning a lot. Like, this experience is more than just the people sitting on the other side of this camera. Like, I'm learning from you all, and I think it's imperative that the next generation soaks up as much as we can from you all. So just to talk about the topic today, as you know, this is Black History Month. It was mentioned a few times. There's this belief that art sometimes is the score to a movement, right? So it's scored, there's a score to the civil rights movement. It was a score to all these different movements. And since we're on Zoom, we're gonna zoom in a little more. And when you zoom in a little more, you actually realize that the art a lot of times is leading the movement, right? Like you said, you go back during slavery, right? The art is how we communicated to one another, right? In 1970, Curtis Mayfield wrote, "We people who are darker than blue, are we going to stand around this town and let what others say come true?" That's 1970. Little did Curtis Mayfield know that the 80s were coming on the horizon, and those words held some people together, right? So I have a question for you all, and we can answer this briefly, but I would like to know, in your opinion, what has been the role of Black American and Afro-Latino performing artists in the struggle for human rights, civil rights, Black Lives Matter, etc.? So what's the role of artists today in those movements and in the past in those movements? And let's start with Hollis.
So this is a really good question, right? So the fight for freedom is a continuum, right? Which we struggle with throughout. I would say this at the beginning. Anybody, any culture that's oppressed, if you want to know the truth about the people, you look in the literature, you look in the poetry, you look in the music. I just got called to do a job for Black History Month for Mac Records. They say we're doing an ad for Black History Month, and basically they had nothing, and I know why, right? Because that's not their experience. They have Black artists on the label, but the people in charge has no. And so I said, okay, send it to me. Tell me what you want. Well, they didn't know what they want. So I wrote an ad. And my headline was, listen to the music, hear our truth. Because for any part of our history, you can go into the music and the stories are there. You could go, put on some Gil Scott-Heron or some Field Hollers and hear the stories, And so I think the music and the literature and all of it is always where you'll find our truth, where you'll find our story. And it continues to be that place, And yeah, I'd leave it like that for now. That's how I see it.
Thank you so much. Brother Calhoun, just because he was talking about storytelling, and you mentioned that you came up with hip hop, right? Hip hop started in the Bronx. You're from the Bronx. So I'd love to hear your perspective on the same question.
Well, our role is to define it, to answer your question, is to define it. Keeping it brief, hip hop came about politically. My generation may have been the last generation to have music in the schools, where you picked an instrument, whether you wanted to play or not, which I think created great musicians, created great conversations for us. We had band class. We would go hang out, who played trombone, trumpet, drums, etc. And I think that was to me, it was just an important part of school as science, math, and the other classes that I was taking. But Reaganomics and the political scene canceled those programs, and the instruments were no longer available. And the genius of the Black and Latin communities are we create out of nothing. That's how we survive in this country. And the scratching came out of just creating another way of doing art. There were some of us that were actually skilled musicians, so we were able to take piano lessons or drum lessons, or our parents put us in music schools, but not all the children had those opportunities, or their parents couldn't afford it. So the brilliance of hip hop is the fact that an art form was created that changed the world, multi-billion-dollar. It came out of being denied access to things. So our role is to define it. And in the hip hop, especially in the beginning, it spoke of our conditions. It wasn't, I'm better than you, or this girl is finer than this girl, and I'm gonna go kill you, I'm gonna go shoot you, and that. It led to different types of things, as all art forms do. But it started out with condition, how we were living. Because in the beginning, also, as a musician from that generation, they didn't even allow that art form in the venues, right? So then stuff, as it started, hip hop was in the park, just like the dope basketball players, the finest girls, and the best break dance, all of that happened, or that was where it was in the park. So hip hop started in the park, plugging into a light pole and getting the power off the city, and then having that situation happen. And even before that, it was a lot of the Caribbean community. It was the reggae kind of dub outdoor events with the big speakers. It really started. Kool Herc and those cats were doing it as almost kind of like Caribbean events. And then it bled into more of the scratching and hip hop thing. So I give, Herc the credit of really starting that concept of how it looks. But to deal with the question, it's our role to define it. We have to talk about, as artists, what's bugging us, what's making us happy, what's pissing us off, what else are we going to do? If we don't do that, then we'll all be in Bellevue, or we'll all be in Guantanamo Bay, or we'll all be in Rikers Island, or we'll all be in Pelican Bay. You can go down the list. And the reality of it is we have to exist through defining ourselves through art. It's food, it's shelter, it's clarity, it's definition, and it's defense.
Thank you for that. Brother King and comes from this theater world, right? He's in this theater world, and he's talking about that. And you're speaking of music and hip hop specifically, but before there was hip hop, there was jazz, right? Jazz was saying something, and you were saying you were writing about that, Brother Scott. So I would love to know, in your world of jazz and writing, the same question for you, but looking at it through the lens of specifically jazz and writing about jazz, because a lot of times people think it's just beautiful notes played, but there is a story being told in jazz a lot of times. So I would love for you to talk about that. Your mic.
Another one of our functions in music, aside from defining, is also to provoke and to bring awareness. But here in America, we're in a somewhat precarious but a very complicated position, you know. So we've always, unfortunately, in the 400 years that we've been here, we're always trying to make folks aware of how we feel, you know. And it goes back to Louis Armstrong, you know, Paul Robeson, Marian Anderson, you know, Romare Bearden. We're always pushing forward, and we're always moving. It's jazz musicians are probably like, they're the workers of America, but it's in the moment. So all of this racist stuff is happening to me, and my emotions feel this, and I'm writing the compositions, and I'm playing the trumpet, flute, drums, or whatever, but it's all a part of our experience. And that experience goes back to Africa. So if you look at, wait, let me just, let me just read a few sentences. Randy Weston wrote this, right? One of my mentors. Music is the sacred art, and God has given us the gift of music for communication. African musicians throughout the world are the gurus of the present day, but theirs is the vision not only of the past and present, but of the future. You know, so, and this is a little pamphlet. If you can find this, you need to get that and read, because they're mostly his quotes. But it's like the past, the present, and the future, and we're always doing that. We're always trying to express, not trying, we're expressing our feelings, our emotions to what this world is doing to us. And that comes out in the art, it comes out in the music, theater, dance, you know. So and the more we do this, we hope more people will understand where we're coming from. But here we are now in 2022 with all these things going on. So obviously they still aren't getting it. But as Hollis said, you have all these ideas and all of these emotions in your head, you know, and in the pen. So it's coming out in the pen, it's coming out in Hollis's art, it's coming out in Calhoun's music. It's because it's the Black music. It's like the OJ said, there's a message in our music.
Thank you so much for that. There definitely is a message in the music. So I want to push this conversation forward, right? You're with the Black Male Initiative in CUNY. We service students through all the CUNY campuses, and all of them will have a chance to kind of listen into this and learn from this. There is an issue that I would like to talk about as the New York life happens and you hear the alarms going through Flatbush. I don't know if you hear that. But there is an issue going on, and the alarm kind of ties it into this, right? There's an issue with violence that's happening in a I'm not saying in a vacuum, but it seems like it's happening in particular spaces, especially gun violence. And you all were creating art and have always created art with integrity. What conversation do you think needs to happen, if there is a conversation that needs to happen, with connecting that BMI generation and younger and sometimes older to this music and this art that you all have created? How can we build that root? How can we build that connection to your art and your world? I'm sorry.
You
Will,
were-
we'll go with you first, Brother Calhoun.
Okay. Well, the short answer is we have a role to play, and we have to communicate. We have to put the phones down and the computers down on the entertainment tip, and we have to pick them up on the educational tip. You know, there's no excuses. We have the Schomburg Library. I was on a panel one time at the Village Vanguard where I was trying to get like a Mos Talib generation to talk to a Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock generation, because, and I'm just going to say this to try to keep it brief, but I felt like I'm in the middle of both of those generations. And I hear jazz cats say, those cats don't make real music. That's whack. When they're making loops or they sampling, don't know how to play. And then I tell the jazz cats, yeah, but this cat sold 400,000 records in a week. So he's doing something right. Now, you may not like the material. Maybe you guys should learn about marketing or finding your audience and serving your audience. And then I was trying to get the two groups to meet, and there was a little bit of back and forth where some of the old cats were like, well, if that cat doesn't know how to play, well, he doesn't even know where middle C is on the piano. And my answer was, why don't you show him? Instead of talking about what he can't do, why don't you open up a little? That's why I love Jazzmobile. It was in a neighborhood in Harlem, and we can all go there and study with master musicians. The cats that I was studying with at Jazzmobile, I had their records at home, and they were sitting down, $25 class, sit down and learn how to arrange with these great, musicians was a diamond for me. So first of all, we got to kind of get past the technology in a distractive way. We got to do hand-to-hand kind of communication, and we can't divide the generations. That's what they did on the plantations. Separate the light ones from the dark ones, the old ones from the young ones, the strong ones from the weak ones. And once you have that separation, we don't have to beat them anymore. Tell them what to do. They're already separated in their minds. So there is a responsibility we have as you have asking us these questions, and we have answering these questions. Outreach is important. I go to schools. I don't tell anybody, I don't believe technically in the technical term of Black History Month. We should be learning about our history every day of the year, because we are the history of this country. Without us, it wouldn't be any history here. So I go to schools. I don't call anybody. Nobody's got to know what I've done, live in color, but forget that. Call the principal in the South Bronx school on 139th Street. Yo, can I come in on Wednesday and talk to the kids? COVID changed all of that, but that's what I used to do. And going, yeah, I spoke at Ivy League schools too. But you know what? The same reaction that I get from youths in those inner city so-called schools, I get the same reaction from the kids who grew up with the silver spoons in their mouth. No diss to whatever they're doing. But I'm just saying that the hand-to-hand, if it's important, y'all have to ask and we have to give, and vice versa. We have to give even if you're asking. So there's a dual responsibility in your question. Yes, me and Ron and Hollis have to be able to communicate with you, but y'all also have to come say, hey, I don't know how to play piano. I don't know how to play guitar. I never heard of Malcolm X. I never heard of Paul Robeson. And then it becomes more community-based. When we're a village, we're indestructible, because we were more than 40,000 years ago. Nobody rolled up on a continent and took jack during that time, because it was a focused vibe on how we were existing. And that's the beginning of the process, where the bridge can't be made. Miles Davis or Dexter Gordon or Cicely Tyson, they can't build these bridges and then we blow them up. Or y'all cross the bridge and then y'all don't know how y'all got over there. And you don't know how to get back. So the communication must continue. I love being around old school cats, and they were dogging me a lot of times. You sound like shit. You can't swing. You need to learn chord melody. I was excited to hear that, because I'm like, oh, I got this bad cat telling me that I suck and I got to work on my time. Great. And as long as you can get into the mode of wanting to receive it, your generation, and not wanting to defend and always, I know, and this is dope. It goes two ways. I got teenagers, man. They bring me music and I tease them. And I'm like, that's garbage. I'm teasing them sometimes because some of it is real fly with some of the new rap and what they're doing and the stuff. But you got it in this house, you got to listen to Train, got to listen to Bird, got to listen to Monk, got to listen to Ohio Players, got to listen to Jackson 5. And as long as you hear that, as long as you know who Romare Bearden is, these kind of things, then yeah, you can go off and do the other stuff. But you got to have that combination. So meeting, we got to come to the 50-yard line and meet and then we can score as many touchdowns as we want.
Thank you for that, Brother Calhoun. Brother Scott, same question. I want to reframe it though, right? There's a generation that gets all their news or the bulk of their news from the Shade Room, right? From all these different blogs. And you have this beautiful institution, the Amsterdam News. How do we reconnect? How do we connect the next generation to Amsterdam News? What's the work that needs to happen, specifically in that literary space of news and how we receive news?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. Because we're in social media, you know, the twilight zone of social media forever, which is what it's going to be. You know, it comes back to my social work hat of just trying to sit down and just break it down. But it also comes when we're doing panels like this and young people could hear. It's like, yeah, you can read. I mean, online they have Pitchfork and some other online music publications that you can read, but it all goes back to the history again. You can read all of those publications. It's going to help you, but you need to know your history. You know, knowing the history is key. You know, because without that, you can't have a real foundation. And since we're talking about Black History Month, when Carter G. Woodson founded Black History, which was actually Black History Day, then Black History Week, and then later in the 70s, it became Black History Month, you know. But he mentioned in one of his writings, he said, each Black History Month, Black folks have to come to the meeting with a brick. Not a brick of destruction to break windows, but a brick to help escalate the foundation that's already there. You know, so each month, from his perspective, with each February, or actually every day, we're supposed to be bringing a brick to the meeting, building up what we've already done, going back from Africa, going back to everyone that's came before to now, you know. And that's what we need to be doing. And that's what we need to be sharing with the young people, whether it's at a panel, whether it's in person, whether it's through email, Instagram, or whatever. But we need all to come together and not be, oh well, you know, I'm not into jazz, you know. And the whole thing of the whole jazz thing is a ploy, because jazz is a part of Black music. And when Will said the Jackson 5, the Ohio Players, Sun Ra, you know, if you're gonna do anything about Black music, you need to check out Sun Ra, you know, because he comes with that whole space galactic thing, you know. So, you know, and it all comes together, you know. Octavia Butler, we're extremely intelligent folks, you know, that we did all of this, you know, and young people need to understand to become greater, you know. So wait, this book right here, The Destruction of Black Civilization. This is a prime book for young people, because the United States and Black folks didn't start in 1621 when we came here, you know, or 1492 when Columbus discovered America, you know. So we have to realize that we didn't start as slaves, you know. We started in the motherland, you know, as kings, queens, and yes, some of us were workers and teachers and everything. But we need to know where we started from, and we can't start from a point where the social structure want to put us at, you know. And it's all comes back to the music and all of our creative talents.
Thank you for that, Brother Scott. You brought up a very valid point, and I just want to make sure that we highlight that the places where we receive our news from can be biased, right? You don't believe me? Turn it on MSNBC, watch an hour of that, hour after that, do your prayers and turn it on Fox and watch an hour after that, and you will see two completely different places, right? But places like the Amsterdam News and other Black publications out there are doing great things. Even Blavity is doing really, really great things. And I think Shade Room may be Black owned, but we want to make sure that, whoever's writing our narrative or who we're receiving our news from has us in mind when writing the news, right? And I can attest from the Amsterdam News, whenever I read it, I feel like I'm learning from someone who's thinking about me. Myself, I went to a Black college as well. I went to Texas Southern University. So my relationship to Black folks teaching me is a bit different than other people. So thank you for that, Brother Scott. Brother King, theater world, right? The art world. You see this little, y'all can't see it, a little Basquiat shirt. You know where I bought this shirt from? Uniqlo. Right? How much money did Basquiat's family get out of me buying this shirt from Uniqlo, right? So I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking of the theater world. I'm thinking of August Wilson. I'm thinking of Lorraine Hansberry, and I'm thinking of how Black theater has played a major role in this arts world. And then I'm thinking of the other side of that, where a lot of young kids that I encounter, especially young Black and brown men, they've never seen a show other than Lion King. Right? And it's because they went there in the 4th grade on a field trip. Now it's Hamilton, right? But how do we reconnect our youth, our kids, our next generation of soldiers? How do we reconnect them to that space of theater? Because you have really amazing things going on, right? You have Dominique Moruso right now with Skeleton Crew on Broadway, right? She just closed the show on Broadway. You have all these amazing Black artists, Black writers, but when you look in the audience a lot of times, there's no young Black people sitting in the audience. There's some, but I mean, like, let's just call it what it is. So how do we reconnect that is my question, Brother King.
I think this is such an important question that you're asking, because as we look at the future, we really have to, in some ways, the adults or the older folks have to pay it forward, right? I mean, when I was a kid, I studied with Milton Glaser, this legendary designer, but I also had people like Jeffrey Holder who grabbed me and took me in. And so I have made it a point all through my career to, one, at University of Music, start an internship program where I took students and I taught them every year. And I remember arguing with the company very ferociously about why I thought it was important for mentorship. And I also lecture at all of the universities in New York to students about creativity. So I've done the music things with both Will and Ron. I've done a lot of music stuff. So I had mentorship programs with kids in music and design and stuff. And I taught them for all the years I've been at the corporation. So I'm the creative director now at the Billie Holiday Theater. And I do something called the Black Arts Institute, where we take students in theater from all around the country, and they come in and they do an intensive with us for several weeks in every semester. And I do a one-day lecture class on creativity with these students. Some of them have come in and done internships with us. And whenever we produce a Black play, we also do matinees where we invite high school students and have talk backs with the students. So we are doing it intentionally in a way to bring the next generation in. We train them in lighting and everything in the theater. They can come in, they could be servers, they could be, ushers, and come in and just soak up as much of the theater as they want. It's a $14 million theater in Brooklyn. And we bring everybody from Broadway and from Hollywood to perform. So I would say a couple other things about the generations connecting. One is, I don't care what you are interested in doing. It is your responsibility to learn as much as you can about that you are pursuing. Learn about miles, learn about train. You cannot not know about what came before you. A lot of good things that have happened before you were born, and you need to learn some of it. Right? The second is, if there is somebody that you admire in the field that you are pursuing, write a note. Let them know. At some point, they were where you were. Everybody won't answer you back, but some will. Pick people that you admire and reach out, because there are a lot of people that are interested, but you gotta make the first effort, right? The other thing is, you have a whole computer in your pocket. Choose how you use it, right? Anything you want to research, anybody you want to find, you have that in your pocket. Leave the gossip. Leave the gossip alone. Go do you and be serious about what you want. Don't quit. Work hard. Push yourself to be a fool. Everything you are going to learn, you're going to have to be a fool first. Push yourself and be okay with being a fool until you learn what you're doing. But that's the best advice I can give.
Thank you so much for that, Brother King. Yeah, that's solid advice. And as we kind of wrap up, something that's been playing on my mind once I got you all on this call, a question that's just kind of ruminating in my mind right now is, it's a statement and a question. There was a point where the popular art, right, was protest art, right? So you look at people dancing, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, right? Dancing, having a good time, dancing to that music, right? And now you look at popular art, and maybe those messages aren't there. What would be, and this is more to artists, right? Young artists who are creating art. What would be some advice that you give them when it comes to creating protest art or Black Power art? What advice would you give to someone like that? And I want to open it up even more, away from art. We just live in a world where protest is extremely important now. So what would you say to a young person who feels this protest inside of them, right? I feel it inside of me. What advice would you give them in getting that protest out of them? Let's start with you, Brother King.
Ouch. I get to go first with this one. I would say a couple of things. In making art, the first thing you have to do is learn your craft and be excellent at it, right? So if you make protest art, you want to be excellent at your craft. So when you make your statement, it hits what you want it to hit, right? I would tell you, when I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, I remember the chokehold. I remember kids getting killed, adults getting killed, and I used to be in those protests. And I remember one day looking at myself outside of myself, like I do, I look at myself on the street. I was so angry. I was so enraged. And I thought, you're gonna lose your life on the street being that angry. I think I'm still as angry as an adult, but I put it in the art, right? Artists put it in the music. I put it up on the stage. I put it in on the album cover. I put it in everything I do, and I think I see my art as part of my protest, as my part of working toward my liberation. So I tend to make art around things that piss me off. And if you are committed to something that pisses you off, boy, if you are committed to culture and history and your liberation, your art is going to be strong because it starts from inside of you, right? Everything that you see visualized is only the manifestation, a physical manifestation of what's inside. And you hit with that. You look at Cuban posters, right? Of protests. You look at Emory Douglas Black Panther art. You look at South African liberation art. You even look at Polish art during oppression, and you see the power that someone who is committed can create. You know, I want that. I want my art to be a cannon, a gun, a knife in its power, right? But you must first develop your skills to a point that you can execute your ideas without even thinking about the physicality of it, but expressing the ideas.
Thank you for that, Brother King. Brother Scott, same question. There's so many different blogs out there again that you know, they have these statements to make. What advice would you give? You all are a wealth of knowledge. I just want to say that on here there is, you know, I don't know how old you are, how many years you've been doing what you've been doing, but there's over 100 years of just professional experience and probably a little more of life experience on this call, right? So we're going to the well, and it's important during Black History Month that we go to our elders and we go back to the roots. You all are roots. We need to get these nutrients from you. So going to the root, one of the literary roots, Brother Scott, what would you say?
Well, number one, when you say protest, that's almost like a double pronged meaning, because we've always protested, and there's protest and there's protest. You say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, like James Brown. You can say Sly Stone, stand. Then you could go to Dr. Billy Taylor ballad and say, I wish I knew how it feels to be free, you know. Or you could go to John Coltrane with was coming from a spiritual perspective, but it was still protest, you know. Or John Coltrane's Naima, beautiful song, that could be protest, you know. So there's degrees of protest, and unfortunately, probably being a Black man in America, I'm damn near pissed off every day anyway, you know. So anytime I go to the computer and start writing, you know, it could be coming from an anger perspective, and also a protest, because I think every day that we as Black people wake up and step outside, it's in protest. Because once we leave our homes, just like the brothers from the 1920s and up, you know, even doing slavery when you're in the cotton field, once you stepped out of that shack, anything could happen to you. You could be beaten, you know, you could be beaten, you could be stabbed, you could be lynched, you know. So there's so many things that could happen to our bodies when we step out. I think subconsciously, everything we write is somewhat of a protest song, a protest composition, me writing a essay or whatever, because we're the folks that they keep trying to push back. So we're always in protest mood.
Thank you so much, Brother Scott. Brother Calhoun, there's a quote, and I don't remember who said it, but it was like when the Black artist, the Black writer goes to the top typewriter, they have to make a conscious decision. Do I write for the masses or do I write for my people, right? You're from that Public Enemy generation where they were screaming, fight the power, right? What advice would you give to an up and coming artist or anyone who has something to say? Because back in your day, for real, it was just messages coming at you through the radio. Now the messages through the radio are something completely different, right? You listen to the radio now, those messages aren't getting through as strongly. So what advice would you give to those young artists, young writers, young whatever, who are sitting and they're watching this and they're like, I want to say something? What advice would you give to them?
Well, connecting with both my colleagues, Hollis made a great point of being knowledgeable about what you want to say, because you have to realize when you say something, you're going to get challenged. You know, one of my most influential human beings on the planet was Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali. Both of them talked about, when I get in the ring and when I say what I want to say, when I will say what I want to say, you better stop me. Bruce Lee's vibe was, once I get a good look at the cat, he better get a gun out, because I'm going to polish him off. There's no way I'm not going to be able to do that. And you have to be that confident and do your research. You know, whatever you want to feel about Michael Jordan's Last Dance or whatever that, I like that documentary because of his work ethic. The politics of it and what happened on the side is one thing. You could choose how you want to live, but he wanted those rings and he got them. So you know there has to be the educational side. Hollis made a great point of knowing what you're going to talk about. But there also, I must say to you, the young folks, there's a fearless side. In Living Color, we were fearless because we weren't hip hop. We didn't have gold chains. We didn't go say yo, 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 yo. We were kind of intellectual brothers that hung out with hip hop cats, talked about jazz, played in this idiom that people consider to be a white idiom. And Black people invented rock and roll. And the masters and architects are all Black men and women. But most of our audience that wrote about us wasn't aware of that. So yes, I had to get knowledgeable on who really wrote Blue Suede Shoes. I had to talk to the Isleys when I met them. And I had to go talk to Jimi Hendrix's father and Sarah Dash and all of these people to get and white people too. Even the Stones dropped some gems on us. You know, the Rolling Stones did drop some gems, Tina Turner and so on. But be informed as much as possible, but you also got to be fearless. You can't be afraid of making a mistake. You can't be afraid of getting out there, because getting knocked down is a lot of information and getting knocked down. You start to go back, oh, I didn't see it coming. I was unprepared. So the next time you get up there, you don't get knocked down on. If you do, you won't get knocked down the same way. So it's very important that you have that information piece, number one. Number two, you got to be fearless. Number three, don't compare yourself to what's already happening and don't complain about what's not happening. If you want to talk about what's going on in Palestine, then you got to do that. If you want to talk about what's happening in South Africa, then you have to do it, because I saw Max Roach was the first person that I saw, not drummer, not jazz musician, the first person that I saw with a bandana on playing the Carnegie Hall Free Nelson Mandela. I was like, what's that? It's the first time that I saw someone outright protest in a venue that wasn't about Nelson Mandela, but he was wearing it and playing it. So those are the things that are very important, that you have to put together a combination piece so you can get out there and do it. But don't start comparing yourself to what's popular, because there's a lot of times we got slagged, right? Jimi Hendrix got slagged by the Black and white community, right? Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team. We can go down the list, but where is it in you? You got to find it in yourself, and you have to build on that knowledge of self by reaching out, by doing your research. But when you come out, you can't be afraid. If you love it, you'll do it properly, and you'll continuously do it. As Ron said, every day when you get up, you'll do it. When you love it, if it means something to you, really, if you really want to say something. And you can choose if you want to go the pop route. I don't slag my colleagues and wanting to go out there and do. I'm not going to do that, and that's my decision not to do that. But what's your decision? So when you say young people want to do something, they have to ask themselves why they want to do it. Is it popular? Is that what you feel? Is it the flavor of the month? Is it because homie's doing it? Or the lady I want to chat up is down with that? What's your reasoning for wanting to get behind it? And then I think when you start to understand those things, you'll really know. I think the drums and music picked me. I didn't pick music in the drums. I was in the street. I wanted to be the first Black motocross champion. I was in the off-road biking where there was no Black kids down with that in the Bronx. I was into other kinds of things. But I think at some point it tapped me on the shoulder and said, yo, man, you got to check this route. So know what you want to do some research on yourself, and don't be afraid, but don't front on yourself. Anything you're dealing with protests, or anything you're dealing with society and your art. And I'll end with this. When I finally met and played with the great B.B. King, and he was dropping knowledge on me, I was leaving that conversation, and he was a fan of Living Color. And he said, young man, one more thing. Don't ever write something you don't believe and put it out, because it might become a hit and you might have to spend the rest of your life telling a lie. I'll leave you with that.
That's a great place to be left off. Thank you so much. So much knowledge. Once again, I'm going to keep saying that there's a lot of knowledge in this. And I just want to reiterate that the topic of this is roots, rhythms, culture, communicating in a troubled land. Right now, we're communicating on several different layers. One person can watch this and not understand anything that we're saying. And I guess that's the beauty of us as Black folks. We've always been able to communicate in ways where if you're not connected, you're not going to be able to receive it. But thank you all so much for being a part of this panel. Thank you, Brother Ron West, for putting it together. I just want to know the final thing. Could you tell us what you're working on right now and how to stay in contact with you? If you can give that to us, because it's really important that we connect to the roots and get these nutrients from you. Go ahead, starting with you, Brother Calhoun.
I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to end with making certain the students can reach out to us. So I'm working on a couple of things. Living Color is going to make a new record. We're putting that together. I have a record from a lot of my journeys in West Africa. Then I'll put out some new music. So to round it off, I'm on Instagram at Will Calhoun Drum. Just my name, WILLCALHOUN Drum. And my website is willcalhoun.com. Just my name.com. Anybody wants to see anything, anybody wants to communicate with me, the lessons, music, information, you can reach me. Those are the two main places to reach me on, Will Calhoun Drum and willcalhoun.com. So that's the contact thing. And anything that I'm about to do or that I'm marketing or advertising or whatever, just check those and you'll be able to see what's there. And I want to say it's a pleasure. And anybody, I'm going to say it out to the students, feel free to reach out anytime. Art is the most important part of our struggle at this point.
Thank you for that, Brother Calhoun. And students, please take him up on this. Brother Scott, what do you have going on? Anything in the future? And how do we stay in contact with you?
I'm working on 2 books right now, one of my own and a joint venture with some other folks. So, and I'm also working on an essay, which I'm excited about. You can reach me. My Instagram is Ron_Scott Jazz. And my email address is rscott, 4, F, @AOL.com. And I love speaking to young people. You know, I have a library. I read a lot of books. I love talking about books and all of the different authors that have written books as it relates to jazz, Black music, art, you know, Chester Himes, the great novelist, you know, so yeah, please feel free to contact me so we could chat, you know, do Zoom or however, but I'm more than willing to share the information that I have, and I'm more interested in getting the knowledge from you as a young person about what's happening now and how, as we've been speaking, we could all come together. So I'm honored for being here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure of being on a panel with these 2 brothers.
Thank you for that, Brother Scott. Brother King. You're muted.
I have a new book coming out. It's called Our Open Caskets to the World. So we had the Black Lives Matter mural in Brooklyn, the first Black Lives Matter mural in New York City. And I documented it. And I have essays by really beautiful people in here. Eddie Glaude is in this book. Dr. Inir Etwaru is in this book. So it's a 212-page book that's going to be out very shortly. And I'm working on a new book now called Imprinted, Illustration and Race from 1702 until today. It's going to be put out by the Norman Rockwell Museum. And it's a 230-page book I'm working on right now. I just finished doing the Kenny Garrett new album, Songs from Our Ancestors. I'm doing a new duets record with Claudia Kuna. I just did a German guy's new album, recorded at Rudy Van Gelder. It's called Grass Machine. And I'm producing a couple of exhibitions and showcases also at this time. Best place to reach me is at mr.hollis.king@gmail.com. And you can Google me at Hollis King Creative in Google, and there'll be a lot of pages that will tell you a little bit about my escapades. And that's who I am. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. A great conversation. I look forward to seeing the feedback. So you were a student that you learned anything, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. We want to keep this information coming to you. And I just want to leave you with this final vision, this final image, right? You're a strong tree right now. You know, in your 20s, 30s, you're a very strong tree. But even the strongest tree needs to be connected to its roots, because then when the fruit comes out from that tree, you know, you get what I'm saying. All right. So we want to reconnect, share this with somebody. Thank you all again. My name is Temeskin Takare, creativeartsteam.org. You can find the work that we do there, and we'll be coming to one of your colleges very soon. So thank you all so much. Peace.